We're recording now. Well, the congregational meeting last Sunday, we decided that we were going to move the devotional before class to after class so that there would be more time in class itself. So we're going to have class from now until 7:45, and then we'll resume and sing a few songs and have our short talk then. But we're going to start class now, and I'd like to begin with a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful to you that you have blessed us with the opportunity to gather together here. We thank you for your word. We praise you for the truths within it. We pray, Father, that as we read your word, that we will be transformed by it, that our hearts will be touched, and that we will be brought face to face with who we ought to be and who we are by comparison. And help us, Father, not to be merely hearers of the word who deceive ourselves, but rather doers of the word as well. Help us not to look in the mirror and then walk away making no changes, but rather, Father, help us to be transformed and to be turned into people more conformed to your glory and your image. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, we are in 1 Kings chapter 2 this evening. If you would open your Bibles there, that's where we're going to pick up. We got partway through it, and what we're noticing is that Solomon is systematically disposing of people who were allied with Adonijah or who had worked against David at some point in his life. And so last time we looked at Adonijah's execution himself. He did a very foolish thing in asking for David's concubine Abishag for a wife, which is a big no-no because when you do something like that, you're basically making a bid at the throne. And Solomon said, seriously, why don't you just ask for the kingdom as well? They had Adonijah executed by Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada. Verses 26 and 27, they also dismissed Abiathar the priest. The reason Abiathar was dismissed was because he was one of the people who had allied with Adonijah in chapter 1. He had found himself on the wrong side of the controversy, and as a result, Solomon dismisses him from being a priest. He does not have Abiathar killed, however, because Abiathar was a priest. He carried the ark before David. We noted last time that what was going on here was actually the fulfillment of a prophecy. In verse 27, it says that Solomon dismissed Abiathar in order to fulfill the word of the Lord, which he had spoken concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. And remember back in 1 Samuel chapter 2, the prophet had come to Eli and told him that because you have despised me, because you've honored your sons above me, I'm going to break your house, I'm going to remove your family from the priesthood. There won't be any of you left who can be priests. And Abiathar is the last surviving descendant of Eli. And I actually went back, looked this up, and got it because I got bamboozled on it last time. But what happened? Eli had two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. They're mentioned in 1 Samuel 1 and verse 3. Phinehas had two sons, Ichabod, whom we know about from 1 Samuel 4, and Ahitub, who's mentioned in 1 Samuel 14 and verse 3. Now Ahitub, that's Eli's grandson, Ahitub has two sons, Ahijah, who's mentioned in 1 Samuel 14 and verse 3, and Ahimelech, who is mentioned in 1 Samuel 22 and verse 9. And Ahimelech's son was Abiathar. So Abiathar is Eli's great-great-grandson. Now everybody else was killed in 1 Samuel 22. Whenever Saul came to Nob and found out that David had been to Nob before him and gotten some help from the priests didn't know David was fleeing from Saul, but Saul nevertheless takes this as a sign of disloyalty on their part, and so he killed most of the priests at Nob, and only Abiathar escaped. Solomon doesn't kill Abiathar, so he's at least better than Saul, but he does dismiss him from being a priest, which means that Eli's family is no longer has any man in the priesthood in Israel. So anyway, that clears up that from last time. Now we're going to pick up with Joab. In verse 28, somebody read verses 28 through 35.
Now the news came to Joab, for Joab had followed Adonijah, although he had not followed Absalom. Joab fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. It was told King Solomon that Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord, and behold, he is beside the altar. Then Then Solomon sent Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, saying, Go fall on him. So Benaiah came to the tent of the Lord and said to him, Thus the king has said, Come out. But he said, No, for I will die here. Benaiah brought the king word again, saying, This Joab spoke. And thus he answered me. The king said to him, Do as he has spoken. Fall on him and bury him, that you may remove from me and my father's house the blood which Joab shed without cause. The Lord will return his blood on his own head, because he fell upon 2 men for righteous and better. Killed them with a sword, while my father David did not know it. Abner the son of Ner, commander of the army of Israel, and Asa the son of Ether, commander of the army of Judah. Said through verse 5, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So shall their blood return on the head of Joab and the head of his descendants forever. But to David and his descendants and his house and his throne, may there be peace with the Lord forever. Then Benaiah the son of Jehoiada went up and fell upon him and put him to death. He was buried at his own house in the wilderness. The king appointed Benaiah the son of Jehoiada over the army in his place. The king appointed Zadok the priest in place of Benaiah.
All right. So what's going on here is you see that people are replacing each other. Zadok replaces Abiathar, and Benaiah replaces Joab. Joab finds out that Adonijah has been killed in verse 28. And this, of course, makes him fearful because he was part of Adonijah's coup. Even though he didn't follow Absalom, he did follow Adonijah. And that makes him an enemy of Solomon. And so he runs to the altar and he takes hold of the horns of the altar. Why does he do that? Why does he take hold of the altar horns? Yes, Jen? Huh? It worked for Adonijah, right? Why would it have worked for Adonijah? What's the point of this?
I heard it back here.
Somebody say it?
Say it louder.
It's a safe place. That's right. You know, did they just make this idea up, or is this found in the law?
Found in the law.
It's found in the law. That's right.
They take their sacrifice to the altar. They take some of the blood of the sacrifice and put it on the horns of the altar. Therefore, that's a place of atonement for sin and not judgment.
Well, actually,
In effect.
there's an explicit text in Exodus 21. Exodus chapter 21 describes... Exodus 21 is the first refuge law. You know how throughout the Bible there's the cities of refuge. You could flee there if you had accidentally killed a person, and you could stay in that city of refuge. And in Exodus 21 and verses 12 through 14, this is before they even had cities of refuge, it says that he who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, I will appoint you a place to which he may flee. Now he doesn't say where that place is yet. But, verse 14, if, however, a man acts presumptuously toward his neighbor, so as to kill him craftily, you are to take him even from my altar, that he may die. Now that text assumes that the altar itself can be used as a place of refuge. You can go to the altar, and that'll be your safe haven if you accidentally kill someone. But, if it wasn't an accident, if you did it on purpose, then the altar is not going to save you. You take them even from the altar and execute them. So the only 2 times in the entire Bible that the altar of God is invoked as a place of refuge are both in the first 2 chapters of 1 Kings. In 1 Kings chapter 1, Adonijah does it, and in 1 Kings chapter 2, Joab does it. Those are the only 2 places in the Bible where somebody actually invokes this law. Now, Joab, well, it works for Adonijah. It doesn't work for Joab. They come to Joab to execute him, and they run into a little problem. What's the problem? Huh? He's at the altar. You know, and he won't let go of the altar. He won't leave. Why is that a problem?
Well, they're afraid to kill him in this place of refuge.
Yeah, they can't kill him in the place of refuge, right? Well, clearly that doesn't work for very long, though, does it? Because in verses 31 and 32, Solomon says, well, just kill him there, basically. So Benaiah falls upon him and has him killed at the altar. Yes, Jen? Why they could do that? Yes, he claims that they have the precedent to execute him because of all of these different people that he has been killing off. Now there is one other interesting twist in the story. Whenever Joab killed Abner, where were they? Anybody remember? Got to go back to 2 Samuel 3 and verses 26 and following. In 2 Samuel 3, Hebron, right. And what was Hebron? They were in the gate of Hebron, and what was Hebron? It was the capital then. Well, what other significance did that city have? No, the altar and the tabernacle were not at Hebron, but good guess. It was one of the 6 cities of refuge. Yes, one of the 6 cities of refuge. And Joab killed Abner inside the gate of the city of refuge, which is a big no-no. I mean, and Joab was claiming this was out of a blood vengeance for his brother Asahel. But he breaks convention, he breaks the rules by having him killed inside the city of refuge and thwarting due process.
Joab's death in the place of refuge was justice.
Right, exactly. There's the equal retribution coming back in the story. Joab gets his just deserts, just as Joab killed somebody in the city of refuge. He himself meets his end by invoking the law of refuge. And so that's kind of the twist in the story. Now, people again go back and forth about whether Solomon was right to do this or not, and I'm just going to leave that to y'all's thinking. The Bible doesn't really jump in and say, and this was bad or this was good. It just kind of leaves you to make these judgment calls yourself as you're reading the story. But yes,
one thing you have to consider here is the refuge of God. These symbols. Like the Ark of the Covenant, the altar, things like that, they were not in themselves sacred. They were only sacred because they were devoted to God. And when someone defiled them, they had defiled them. Joab is actually defiling the altar at this time by taking hold of the horns. Just like Israel defiled the Ark of the Covenant when they brought it into the battlefield thinking it was going to give a victory over the Philistines.
Okay.
So, God didn't have any regard for that.
Well, yeah, there's that. I mean, take him even from my altar. Again, we have that in 1 Samuel, in Exodus 21 as well. But the point of all of this is that, Joab's had this coming for a long time. He killed 2 men more righteous than he and shed the blood of war in the time of peace. David instructed Solomon not to let his gray hair go down to Sheol. All right, that brings us to the last part of the chapter, Shimei. 1 Kings 2, beginning in verse 36. And we'll go ahead and read down to verse 46. I'll go ahead and read this one. Now the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, "Build for yourself a house in Jerusalem, and live there, and do not go out from there to any place. For on the day you go out and cross over the brook Kidron, you will know for certain that you shall surely die. Your blood shall be on your own head." Shimei then said to the king, "The word is good. As my lord the king has said, so your servant will do." So Shimei lived in Jerusalem many days. But it came about at the end of 3 years that 2 of the servants of Shimei ran away to Achish, king of Maacah, king of Gath, son of Maacah, king of Gath, and they told Shimei, saying, "Behold, your servants are in Gath." Then Shimei arose and saddled his donkey, and went to Gath for Achish to look for his servants. And Shimei went and brought his servants from Gath. It was told Solomon that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned. So the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, "Did I not make you swear by the Lord and solemnly warn you, saying, you will know for certain that on the day you depart and go anywhere, you shall surely die? And you said to me, the word which I've heard is good. Why then have you not kept the oath of the Lord and the command which I have laid on you?" The king also said to Shimei, "You know all the evil which you acknowledge in your heart, which you did to my father David. Therefore the Lord shall return your evil on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever." So the king commanded Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, And he went out and fell upon him so that he died. Thus the kingdom was established in the hands of Solomon. All right. So what do you notice about this compared to how he's dealt with other people thus far in his reign?
Well, I think that these situations, Adonijah and Shimei, show that Solomon had a great deal of wisdom before God gave him all the wisdom that he had. Because he said to Adonijah, in effect, you will judge yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a worthy man, then you'll live. Right. Let Adonijah actually make the judgment. Here, Shimei is being told the same thing. Kind of similar to Saul's taking the baby and saying, cut it in half and give half to each mother.
Well, we're going to get to that story.
The mother said, oh no, don't kill the child.
Okay.
So here he does that, and he says to Shimei, you're going to judge yourself.
There's a
Jerusalem, you'll live.
There's a practical reason for what's going on here. Here's my attempt to draw a crude map of the area again. All right. All right, so first of all, what do we know about Shimei? Where's he from? And where's that? What tribe is he from? He's from the tribe of Benjamin, which I will just abbreviate as Ben. All right? Now he's from the tribe of Benjamin, and who is he loyal to? We went over this last time, actually. I'm sorry, speak up, please. Saul, yes. He's loyal to the house of Saul. Now, that whenever he cursed David, he said, the Lord is bringing vengeance on you for the household of Saul. You caused the bloodshed up, which, all right. Now, Jerusalem is located right here. Kind of in the overlap between Judah and Benjamin, right? And Shimei is really kind of the last real supporter of the house of Saul. And so Solomon tells him that if you go over the brook Kidron, you will die. What's this intended to prevent him from doing? Going back home to Benjamin. What might he do in Benjamin? Might rally his troops together. The last conversation he has with David in 2 Samuel 19, note that he has 1,000 men with him. He has a base of supporters. Solomon is trying to stifle that off, we might notice. All right? Now, one day, Shimei's men go and flee to Gath. Anybody know where Gath is on this map?
That away almost directly.
Right, exactly. Gath is that way. Totally in like the opposite direction. Kind of interesting, is it not? So what Solomon does here effectively is he puts Shimei in this situation where he swears to this oath. Now the spirit of the oath is you don't go to Benjamin and rally troops. But when the day comes for where Shimei actually breaks the oath, he goes in the opposite direction because he's got some other thing going on. So what Solomon does is he takes a super strict interpretation of this oath. The oath's intent was to keep him out of Benjamin, but a trip to Philistia to retrieve slaves counts too. Now some people have castigated Solomon for his unfairness, and some people have said, well, Shimei had it coming again, so there's that going on too.
It says don't cross the brook, it says do not go out from there.
Right. Well, no, like I said, he picks on the brook of Kidron in particular, but then later on he calls him on the wording and says, oh, by the way, you weren't supposed to go anywhere, really. Because that's technically what he said. Yeah, the gist of it's don't leave Jerusalem. Definitely. Okay, now, so the one slip up becomes an excuse to kill. Now, so why is Shimei dying here? What's the reason given? Well, yeah, David did leave Solomon with instructions about this. In verse 42, Solomon says, you made the oath, you broke the oath. That's why you're going to die. But the real reasons given in verse 40, the reasons given in verse 43, why didn't you keep the oath? But the real reasons given in verse 44, you know all the evil which you acknowledge in your heart, which you did to my father David. Therefore the Lord shall return your evil on your head. Solomon isn't deceptive about what's going on. He says the real reason for this, Shimei, is because this is a rebound of the harsh judgment you pronounced on David. You pronounced judgment on David when he left Jerusalem. Now judgment is pronounced on you because you left Jerusalem.
Wayne,
Yes.
in verse 36, though, he says to him, do not go out from there to any place.
Right. No, I'm saying that that's true. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm saying that the gist of the oath may have been
in there.
Right, that is in there. The point is Solomon calls him on a technicality.
Yeah, well,
right.
I don't think it's a technicality. I think Solomon throws in the day you go and try to rise up, rising against me, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And I think Solomon at that time would have thought that would be the most likely place he would go if he left Jerusalem. You don't go from Jerusalem anywhere.
You don't go anywhere, right. Well, Jen. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, is mentioned quite a few times. He's actually part of David's cabinet. If you remember back in 2 Samuel for instance, he's mentioned in 2 Samuel 8, 2 Samuel 20. In verse 23, it says that 2 Samuel 20, verse 23, it says, Joab was over the whole army of Israel. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and the Pelethites, which basically were hired mercenaries. So Benaiah is kind of over this other part of the army. But once Joab is removed, Benaiah is made to be commander in Joab's place. Benaiah is also in the list of David's mighty men, actually, in 2 Samuel 23 in verses 20 through 23. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done mighty deeds, killed the two sons of Ariel of Moab. He also went down and killed a lion in the middle of a pit on a snowy day. He killed an Egyptian, an impressive man. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, but he went down to him with a club and snatched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. These things Benaiah the son of Jehoiada did. He had a name as well as the three mighty men. So Benaiah was a pretty important person when David was king. And now he's a pretty important person for Solomon at the start of his reign. In 1 Kings chapter 4, he's still listed as over the army in 1 Kings chapter 4 and verse 4. Benaiah the son of Jehoiada was over the army. Since David and Solomon both ruled for 40 years, I don't know how long his tenure overlapped with both of them. It'd be a long time to be commander of an army if he was the whole time. But anyhow, Benaiah falls on Shimei, he dies, and the main point of this text, as we noted before in chapter 2, is that the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. That's actually kind of a bookend to this whole thing. In verse 12, Solomon sat on the throne of David his father, and his kingdom was firmly established. In verse 46, the last section says, thus the kingdom was established in the hands of Solomon. Chapter 2 is about the establishment of Solomon's kingdom. A lot of people die to establish Solomon's kingdom. Yes, Jen?
Compared to how he's taken over.
Yeah, of course it should have, you would think a more peaceful shift would be in order because of the fact, we're passing the kingdom down from father to son. But we find frequently, even when that happens in the Bible, that, there's sometimes a very bloody struggle for the throne between the king's sons. For instance, Jehoshaphat's son Jehoram kills off pretty much all of his brothers to secure power on his throne. The point of all of this is to say that, kingdoms are not established without the shedding of blood. We want to take a more further looking perspective on it. We already talked about this a little bit last time. But, applied to the kingdom of our Lord, the kingdom of Jesus, that kingdom is not established without the shedding of blood either. Jesus had to die to establish that kingdom. And then, of course, there are those who oppose that kingdom who will be destroyed as he finally comes into his power when he returns at the end of the age. That's in large part what the book of Revelation is about. And it's a harsh reality, but it is one that I think we need to contemplate and reflect seriously upon. There will only be two kinds of people when the Lord comes back. There will be those who were part of his kingdom, and there will be those who were not part of his kingdom. There will be those who submitted to his rule, and there will be those who decided to rebel against his rule. Now the question is, of course, which one will we be? Will we be the ones who submit to him, who place our trust in Him, or will we be the ones who ignore Him or fight against Him and show indifference to His regime, perhaps? Those are things to think about anyway. And certainly very sobering thoughts, for me anyway. Okay, that brings us to the end of chapter 2. Just a couple other random notes. I don't really have a place for these. I'll just mention them. Solomon's kingdom, in 1 Kings chapters 1 through 11, there's a whole structure to the way that Solomon's reign is put together. But chapters 1 through 11 of 1 Kings are all about Solomon. And the beginning part in chapters 1 through 2 and the ending part in chapter 11 have some things in common. In chapters 1 and 2, we have a record of 3 adversaries that Solomon has to put down. And we have a message from the prophet Nathan talking about the succession of David. Well, in chapter 11, we have a similar thing going on. We have 3 adversaries stirred up against Solomon because of his idolatry. And we have a message from the prophet Ahijah talking about how the kingdom is going to fare after Solomon is gone. So that's something to kind of note as we go throughout this. I would note in passing that there is no record of any prophet coming to Solomon during his reign and rebuking him directly. There's kind of an old joke about that. Solomon made much profit, but there were no prophets in his time. I'm not sure which is worse, the fact that I didn't come up with that joke or the fact that I repeated it. But yes, God always speaks to Solomon directly, as far as we can tell. He never sends a prophet or an intermediary, which is kind of unique, actually. Most of the kings in Israel's history, they deal with them through prophets. Even the righteous kings like Hezekiah and Josiah. So those are things to note. Chapter 3. Any comments or questions on chapter 2 before we move on? No, good. We all understand it perfectly. Chapter 3. Can I get a volunteer to read the first 4 verses of chapter 3?
Solomon formed a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, Pharaoh's daughter, and brought her to the city of David until he had finished building his own house, and the house of the Lord, and the wall around Jerusalem. People were still sacrificing on the high places because there was no house built in the name of the Lord until this day. Now Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, except he sacrificed and burned in high places. The king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was a great high place. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar.
Okay. All right, so the first question I have is, how should we evaluate Solomon's marriage to Pharaoh's daughter? Because this has stirred up some controversy before. What do we think of the fact Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter?
Correctly violated Moses' commandment not to go back to Egypt for anything.
Not to go back to Egypt for anything. Okay, all right. Anybody else have thoughts? Unequally yoked? That's sometimes brought up in 2 Corinthians 6:14. There's some question about whether that passage is talking about intermarriage between the faithful and the unfaithful. I know some people that think that. I don't personally think that, but it's an interesting thing to bring up anyway. There's something that Solomon's marriage to foreign women gets him in a lot of trouble. And that comes up especially in chapter 11. Now let's fast forward a little bit. Even though we're not supposed to read the end of the story first, we're going to read the end of the story first. 1 Kings chapter 11. 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 1 says that King Solomon loved many foreign women along with the daughter of Pharaoh. And so these are like, up to this point he's only had one wife mentioned in the text. That's the daughter of Pharaoh. And the narrator's like, oh, by the way, Solomon had a lot more wives than just the daughter of Pharaoh. He had Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel, you shall not associate with them, nor shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. Solomon held fast to these in love. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. And his wives turned his heart away. Now you think about that. That's That's, I mean, no one else has that many wives in the Bible at all. I'm not sure what the world record in human history is, but Solomon's up there. That's a lot of wives. With 700 wives and 300 concubines, you do the math. How much time can you spend with each one individually and get to them all? Well, it's, if you spent one night with each wife, you would eventually get to them all after about 4 years. It's a lot. And they're foreign women, and he builds shrines to their gods, and they turn his heart away, is what happens. Now, the question is, of course, does the statement in chapter 11 and verse 1 mean that Pharaoh's daughter was kind of the exception to the rule, the one that didn't turn his heart away? Or shall we interpret her in the context of all the rest of this?
Wasn't there some place that simply states that he brought in dirt from Egypt? I can't find it right now.
Where he brought in what?
That he brought dirt from Egypt to build her an altar?
I don't know. I don't remember that one. I don't remember reading that. That sounds like a Talmudic thing, honestly. But I mean, it could be. But what did you say, Jen?
Made a house for Pharaoh's daughter in chapter 7.
He did build her a house. That's true. He builds her a house in chapter 7, and it's kind of her own special house. I forget. I think Chronicles might have had some extra information about that house, but I don't think bringing dirt from Egypt was in the mix there. Let me see. First Chronicles. This is where, Second Chronicles. This is where it would help me a lot to be up on my parallels. Kings Chronicles parallels. I'm still working on that. I wanted to make a chart for this class, but I didn't get it done in time, so maybe someday. It's hard. Second Chronicles. You know what? I'm going to look that up and just get back to you on it. I'm not going to spend class time digging for this. But I do remember Chronicles had some extra information about the house, but I can't remember where it is. Anyhow, Pharaoh's daughter is mentioned 4 times in the book of Kings, by the way. And she's only mentioned once in Chronicles. I did have it in my notes. 2 Chronicles 8. Just had to keep reading, Wayne. 2 Chronicles chapter 8 and verse 11. Okay, and it says there, Solomon brought Pharaoh's daughter up from the city of David to the house which he had built for her. For he said, my wife shall not dwell in the house of David, king of Israel, because the places are holy where the ark of the Lord has entered. Solomon offered burnt offerings to the Lord on the altar of the Lord, which he had built before the porch, and did so according to the daily rule. Okay, so now it's talking about something else. All right, so the point is, he gets her own house because he doesn't want her living in a house where the ark has been. So he has some kind of restriction that he's put in place as the result of her being a foreigner. Now, were all foreign marriages forbidden in Israel? You're shaking your head. Why not? Okay, that is true. The only passage that talks about intermarriage in the law is in Deuteronomy chapter 7, where it explicitly forbids the intermarriage with Canaanite women, because the Canaanites were the peoples that they were charged with destroying. Deuteronomy is primarily concerned with Canaanite marriages, and Egypt is never actually explicitly mentioned in any list of nations with which marriage was forbidden, in Deuteronomy 7 or in Exodus 34. Now the marriages that Kings criticizes Solomon for are in chapter 11, and not this particular one. So the text is being selective, though. I'll point something else out too. The text is not telling you the story in order. Has Solomon married any other women by this point in his reign? Doesn't make it sound like it, right? Okay.
Definitely seems to be special attention.
Yeah, she gets special attention. But let's think about this for a minute, okay? All right. How long was Solomon king? Anybody know? It's in chapter 11, verses 42 and 43. 40 years. Solomon's king for 40 years. How old is his son when he becomes king? Look at chapter 14 and verse 21. He's 41, which means he's born 1 year before Solomon takes the throne. Who's his mother? Same verse. Speak up. Naamah, she was an Ammonite woman. So before Solomon even takes the throne, he already has at least one wife who's an Ammonite woman. If you do the math, and if you assume that the numbers are supposed to be literal and not, symbolic like some interpreters do, Solomon's married to an Ammonite woman already by this point. So the text is being selective. The text is not telling you the story in order. There's a reason for this. Kings is doing this on purpose. It is portraying the early segment of Solomon's reign. It tries to portray him in a more favorable light. And pretty much everything pre-temple, up through the temple, all that. But the latter segment of Solomon's reign, not so much. It kind of tries to not portray him in a favorable light. And the text is very explicit that it was in his old age that he turned his heart away from God. Now I know there are some people who think that Solomon repented in his old age and turned back to the Lord. That's possible, but I think that's wishful thinking, personally. So that's... and there's no biblical statement that leads us to believe that. It's just basically a guess when it's all said and done. So Pharaoh's daughter stays in the city of David until Solomon builds his own house in the house of the Lord. Spending all this time on one verse. Now, verses 2 through 4, we have a mention of the high places. What were the high places? Anybody know? What was a high place? It was the opposite of a low place.
Place that was built up by the people. Island.
Right.
Thinking my God is up there, and so I need to get closer to him.
Right. Now, high places took a lot of different forms in the ancient world. There's a story about high places in Ezekiel 20, which makes a play on the Hebrew term bama. That's the high place. High places were sometimes on hills. Sometimes they were in houses, and it was like a little elevated place. You have the floor, and then you have a little altar on the high place.
Kind of like where we put the
Yeah, kind of. I'm not standing on a high place. I don't know about all that.
Sunday morning.
Well, that's because on Sunday morning it's different, right? No. But yeah, now here's the thing. Did high places have idols in them? Some of them. And we've actually seen setups like this in India. They set up a little elevated place in the house where they set the idol on it. But sometimes high places had idols, sometimes they didn't. It depends on where you're at. When did high places not have idols? Well, chapter 3 would be one instance of that, right? And you'll see that remark made throughout the book of Kings. This king was righteous, but everybody kept sacrificing on the high places. This king was righteous, but the people continued to sacrifice to the high places, but only to Yahweh. So sometimes the text qualifies it by saying the people were using the high places, but they weren't using it for idol worship. They were just using it to worship Yahweh. And so it's kind of viewed as a lesser sin in the text. Were high places approved of? No. Is that true without qualification? Yes, Jen?
Why does God come to him after the sacrifice?
Good question. All right. Were high places always unapproved of? Good question. Where is the tabernacle right now? Anybody know?
Still in Shiloh.
No, Shiloh's been destroyed. It's gone. What? Some people think so, and I kind of think so.
That's right. You and I had this discussion before. We don't know.
No, we really don't. There's some evidence that it was destroyed, but here's where it gets really interesting. Okay, flip over to the parallel account we get to look at a parallel account in 2 Chronicles chapter 1. 2 Chronicles chapter 1 in verses 1 through 6. All right? I'll read this in the interest of time. Solomon, the son of David, established himself securely over his kingdom. The Lord his God was with him and exalted him greatly. Solomon spoke to all Israel, to the commanders of thousands and of hundreds, and to the judges, and to every leader in all Israel, the heads of the fathers' households. Then Solomon and all the assembly with him went up to the high place, which was at Gibeon. There's our parallel. For God's tent of meeting was there, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, had made in the wilderness. However, David had brought up the ark of God from Kiriath-Jearim to the place he had prepared for it, for he had pitched a tent for it in Jerusalem. And the bronze altar, which Bezalel the son of Uri, the son of Hur, had made, was there before the tabernacle of the Lord, and Solomon and the assembly sought it out. Solomon went up there before the Lord to the bronze altar, which was at the tent of meeting, and he offered 1,000 burnt offerings on it. Okay, so, what's going on here? Let's get some of this out of the way. Is you've got two places where you're worshiping right now. You've got Gibeon, which is the high place, abbreviated HP, and you've got Jerusalem. Which one of these places is the correct place to worship right now? In the story, I mean, not right now today, but at this point in the story, which one of these places is the right place to go to? Well, let's talk about what's there. What's at Gibeon?
Tabernacle.
Yeah, and he calls it the tent of meeting, and that's ambiguous because there's actually two tents of meeting in the Old Testament. There's the official tabernacle, and then there's the tent of meeting that Moses had set up in Exodus 33. This could be one or the other, and I'm not sure which it is. That's one of those great stumper questions. All right, what else is here? Where's the ark? Where's the ark, by the way? Oh, the ark's in Jerusalem. You already said that. All right, so the ark's here. Any pieces of furniture here? All right, so the bronze altar is here. All right? So all the tabernacle furniture is all over the place. You see it, don't you? You know, the altar's at the high place of Gibeon with the tent of meeting. The ark's at Jerusalem. Where's God? Well, yeah, God's everywhere. That's the point. So is Solomon wrong to sacrifice at the bronze altar in Gibeon? I wouldn't say so. I mean, and everything about Chronicles is trying to legitimize what he's doing here. And God approves of him doing this. Now, Kings doesn't mention the altar. That's what's interesting about this. Kings makes no effort to really try to point this out.
It does mention that he loved God there.
It does mention that he loved the Lord. That's right. Love is mentioned 3 times in regard to Solomon's life. The Lord loved Solomon in 2 Samuel 12. 1 Kings 3, Solomon loved the Lord. 1 Kings 11, Solomon also loved many foreign women. So there's that part of the story as well. Solomon's love is a little bit divided. All right, now I realize that we're spending a lot of time on this. Why do they sacrifice on the high places? What's the reason given in chapter 3 and verse 2? We're back in 1 Kings. I'm sorry? There was no house for the Lord. There is no temple. All right? Now you go to the law. Deuteronomy chapter 12 and verses 13 and 14 says, "Be careful that you do not offer your burnt offerings in every cultic place you see, but in the place which the Lord your God chooses in one of your tribes, there you shall offer your burnt offerings, and there you shall do all that I command you." Deuteronomy 12 is the big discourse about why you shouldn't go to high places. And the reasoning it gives is it says you can only sacrifice to the Lord your God at the place which He chooses. Once He chooses a place, you can't go anywhere else. But in 1 Kings 3, there is no place set yet. All the tabernacle furniture is scattered. The temple hasn't been built yet. That's all going to change. Now, of course, and we're out of time. Final question. Where does the Lord want us worshiping today? Wherever. Yeah. Basically. It's neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem that you will worship. The day, the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. God is spirit, and those that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. John chapter 4, verses 22 through 24. All right, we will pick up with the rest of chapter 3 next time. And hopefully get a little further, hopefully finish that chapter. I appreciate your comments, and we will get back to it next time.